we need to compare plausibility. Plausibility between worldviews and observations. Reasons for the Christian God. And I would go in 2 steps, as I explained in the previous section. First, some arguments for the existence of a personal God. Again, these are no proofs. And even Aquinas, Thomas of Aquin, has never thought of his arguments as proofs, but only as viae, as ways to expand on the plausibility of faith in a personal God. And then in the 5th and final chapter, why the Christian God, why Jesus Christ. So, 4th chapter, reasons for a personal God. Arguments that make faith in a personal God more plausible than its opposite. The first is causality, cosmological argument. The second one is purpose, teleological argument. And the third is reason, the epistemological argument. And the fourth is morality. So the cosmological argument could basically be formed like that. The question is, where does the cosmos, the universe, come from? Cosmos and universe both means more or less everything material in Greek and in Latin. Does the cosmos have a beginning, or is it eternal? The argument goes like that. It's an argument used by William Lane Craig, the Kalam cosmological argument. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. We use this argumentation in science a lot. If something is there that has not been there before, it usually has a cause. There is some cause behind that, some force or something that caused it to be there. Second, the universe has a beginning. This is scientific evidence that the universe has not been there forever. If both premises are correct, then the logical conclusion from that is the universe is something that has a beginning, but everything that has a beginning has a cause. Then also our material universe must have a cause. Very logical. Well, and then you have to discuss, of course, the premises. Premise 1 usually is accepted by most scientists, but premise 2, for a long time, has not been accepted by scientists, interestingly. Secular scientists 100 years ago, even Albert Einstein and also one of his friends, cosmologist Arthur Eddington, they believe that the universe is eternal and static and will not change and has not a beginning. At least not change on the large scale. If something happens on a small planet, there could be some changes, but on the large scale, the universe will not change. And so when evidence appeared that the universe might have undergo dramatic changes and even have a beginning, Sir Arthur Eddington published in 1931 in Nature, philosophically, the notion of a beginning of the present order of nature is repugnant. So he didn't like it at all. I should like to find a genuine loophole. This has to do with Einstein's general relativity. This is the equation. And the evolution of the universe can be calculated and modeled according to that equation. And basically, you will, of course, not understand the different letters that you see there. There's an R and a G and a lambda and a T and numbers. It's very complex. And actually, it's not just one equation. It's a tensor equation, so it's 16 equations. 4x4 tensors, and as only 10 elements are independent because of symmetry reasons, it's actually 10 equations. Okay, but don't worry about that. But you have a space-time, a term in that equation that describes the geometry of space-time. What is the geometry of space-time? Is it curved or is it plane? And so on. On the other side, you have a term that describes the gravitational force. So the distribution of matter, where do you find matter? And how does matter act on each other? It always contracts and attracts matter to each other. And then you have a third term, which mathematically is allowed, but physically, for Einstein, it was not clear whether we need that term. But he thought, if I introduce that term, then we can have a static eternal universe. Without that term, a static eternal universe is very improbable because it would easily collapse. Well, and then we had evidence by Hubble and by Penzias and Wilson, the cosmic microwave background and so on. And this indicated that the universe is not static, but it will actually move apart from each other. the light of other galaxies is redshifted, which means that the frequencies are shifted to lower frequencies, lower energies, and that happens when a car drives up to you. Then the frequencies become higher, but if it drives away from you, the frequencies become lower. And lower frequencies in light terms means red shift. The light looks more red, and everything nearly looks red. So this was the argument. Okay, so there are scientific arguments why people started to doubt that. And then there are quotes by many different atheists who were not happy with that. John Maddox says, doubt with the Big Bang in 1989. Look at the date here. That's 50 years after the evidence was discovered, actually, nearly 60 years. He says the Big Bang is thoroughly unacceptable because it implies an ultimate origin of the world, whose cause or causer lies beyond the universe. He realizes this is a door for God. John Gribben says the biggest problem with the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe is philosophical, perhaps even theological. What was there before the Big Bang? So that's a problem for atheists. Arno Penzias is a theist, a Jewish theist. He got the Nobel Prize for discovering one of these big evidences, the cosmic microwave background. And he wrote, the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Because in the Bible, it always says the universe has a beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So I would expect that we must somehow find evidence for a beginning in his terms. And that's what happened. So the universe has a cause. The universe is not self-explaining. Matter is not self-explaining. But what is? Well, if we take Christian theism or an Aristotelian God even, it doesn't have to be Christian theism, but an Aristotelian God, a personal God, a God who is transcendent, beyond nature, not part of nature, but created nature, who is immaterial, could have a relationship to matter, but is not himself material, has no beginning as an immaterial being, and is eternal, no ending and no beginning, then of course it is possible to believe that this could be a good cause for the universe. This is no proof that this God is the cause of the universe, but it is more plausible than to claim that matter itself created itself when the universe has actually a cause. So matter and the universe is not self-sufficient. What is? The material universe is not eternal, it has a beginning. It is limited in space and time. It expands, that means there is some limitation to it, and it obeys natural laws, cause and effect. When we read, for example, in the Bible, John 4:24, it says God is spirit. So God is not material, but can create matter. Spirit can be eternal, existing without a beginning. A mind does not necessarily need a beginning or a cause. A mind can just exist. Spirit can be omnipresent. It is not limited in space and time. And spirit can devise and design rational laws to which a material process has to conform. And spirit can influence matter. For example, when I think about something, I change immediately the material structure of my brain. This can even be measured. When I think about a mathematical equation or about a nice picture, this changes the state of my mind, of my brain. Not only of my mind, but also of my brain. So thoughts, spiritual things, matters of mind can actually change matter. And I can say I want to move something, and then I move my hand, and with my hand I move something else. So spirit can influence matter. That's something that we live with every day. So it could be that God was there from the beginning, and it says, quick-witted, God had then taken a photo of the Big Bang, which he still considered quite impressive. So what we can be sure is the universe has a beginning. It's not self-sufficient. It's not self-explaining. While the Christian concept and notion of God is self-explaining and self-sufficient. God does not need a creation because he is eternal and hence is the cause for everything else that exists. That's the Christian definition of God. There is no infinite chain of events. There is a beginning to everything. And God as spirit exists from eternity to eternity. So in my view, this makes it more plausible that there is an ultimate personal creator than that the universe is everything that exists. Because the universe, that's what we know for sure from science, is not self-explaining. But we can discuss further later. The second argument is connected to that cosmological argument. It's the teleological argument. It asks the question, is it more plausible to believe in blind chance and purely natural causes that happen by necessity? Or is it more plausible to believe in intelligent planning, or as it is sometimes called, intelligent design? Look at the picture of that cat below. This cat is entirely made up of sand grains by my daughter, actually, when she was younger, in the holidays. And basically, it's a contingent system, a system of some sand corns put together. But it seems that this system is composed from independent components. The sand corns don't know about the places of the ears and eyes and so on, but they are composed in that way, and they achieve a function, or in this case, more a purpose. It reflects the image of a cat only in conjunction. If you take away the corns of the head, for example, then you won't realize it's a cat actually. And if we find such a system, a contingent system that could look very different and that does not exist by necessity, which is composed from independent components which only achieve a function in conjunction, then this system is intelligently generated. Teleology. This is a philosophical statement. And the second statement would be the universe, Earth, life system is such a system, which means that the universe could look much different from its current state, which we can measure, and the Earth in the universe could look much different. But as everything in the universe works together, independent components fulfilling certain functions in the universe, it seems that everything serves the existence of life, which otherwise would not be thinkable in a universe. And if that is the case, then it's a good case that the universe is intelligently generated. Philosophically, it's important to support this argument by the so-called STT thesis by philosopher Wolfgang Stegmüller. He says, whoever talks about purposes, aims, or plans presupposes explicitly the existence of a mind and will, which intends purposes, pursues aims, and designs and realizes plans. That is, if we talk about purposes, we talk about persons. Only purposes are intelligent, and only persons can have an intention, a will, want to pursue aims, and so on. Nature always is a sequence of states that follow from each other, but only a person can think about an aim that it wants to achieve in the future and then changes the current state according to the plans to achieve a certain goal in the future, a certain aim. Purpose implies a mind, and mind implies a person. Matter, in the opposite, has no purpose. So very important, as soon as we discover purpose in nature, this is already a strong argument for a personal being. So, and when we now look at evidence, you find more on that in many different books, also in our movie, Our Fascinating Universe, for example, which can be found on Vimeo. You find, for example, the example of the vacuum energy density or of the gravitational density. Both are elements of the equation of Einstein that I showed you before. And there are constants actually in those. One is lambda and the other one is g. You found them in the equation. And both of them have to be fine-tuned to a degree of 1 to 10 to the power of 60. If you change either one of them, either gravity or vacuum energy density, the so-called dark energy, by just that tiny amount in the course of the history of the universe, then there will not be stars or even not a universe, because the universe either collapses, because matter will pull so strongly that the universe collapses within a short period of time, or the universe will expand so rapidly that you will not be able to form any material structures because they will be ripped apart by the expansion of the universe. So this is an accuracy that is so strong and so large that even human beings cannot achieve this accuracy. Gravitation wave telescopes, to my knowledge, achieve an accuracy of 1 to 10 to the power of 23. These constants in the equations of Einstein, which describes the universe, have to be fine-tuned to a precision of 10 to the power of 60. Lawrence Krauss writes in the Astrophysical Journal the most extreme fine-tuning problem known to us in physics. Lawrence Krauss, by the way, is an atheist, but he admits this is a really extreme, the most extreme fine-tuning problem that we have, and of course there are others as well. The precision can be compared by physicist Paul Davies that a sniper who shoots a gun wants to hit a 1-cent coin. A 1-cent coin not in another city, not on another continent, not on the moon, not on another planet, not on another solar system, not in another galaxy. No, at the other end of the universe. Then the surface of the coin is exactly 1 to 10 to the power of 60 of the surface of the sphere that we can observe. Or if you take the whole mass of the universe, this is about 10 to the power of 60 times the mass of one hair. Well, I don't have hairs to show to you, but you can look at your own hair. You can say by one hair, we would not exist. Taking these constants into account that appear in Einstein's equations. Very interesting comparison, actually. This was so astonishing and unexpected to cosmologists that even the German magazine Der Spiegel, the Mirror, which is actually rather a secular magazine and does not like so much religion, took that as the headline in the German news, God's Big Bang, cosmology at the limits towards religion, when this was discovered. But this was not the only discovery. We have a lot of discoveries. The four fundamental forces have to be balanced in a certain way so that we actually can arrive at atoms. And we need atoms in order to have molecules. We need molecules in order to have organic matter, in order to have organic beings like us and animals and so on. And several others. I don't go into the details because it might be too complicated. You can read and inform yourself in other ways about that. For example, next Tuesday night, there will be a webinar on that with Luke Barnes. Some of you might have the information already. If you don't have, you can contact me. I can forward the link to you. Yeah, this is about calculating all these limits, and you find out there are quite a few of these fine-tunings. Depending on what you describe as fine-tuning, you end up with 30 fine-tunings up to hundreds of fine-tunings and so on. And so even agnostic people like Fred Hoyle would say a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, if we also look at the system Earth and Sun. The geodynamo, the Earth magnetic field is very important, for example. If this would not exist, and many planets do not have a magnetic field, then the solar wind would hit the Earth with full power, all these ions, and would destroy all organic molecules. We could not exist. But because of the magnetic field, this death-bringing wind of the sun is actually changed into an aesthetic northern light, into the aesthetic northern lights that you can observe in Norway, for example, or sometimes in recent days even lower to the south. Something beautiful made by the magnetic field from something deathly. From that, scientists follow the anthropic principle. The universe must exhibit the properties that allow for the existence of intelligent observers, because otherwise we would not be there. But this is actually exchanging cause and effect, because the universe, of course, did not know that we would be there. So physically, the universe was there first and we came late. Of course, looking back, it is a logical syllogism. It's a logical self-evident statement that we can only exist in a universe that allows for our existence. Yes. But why is there this universe? This is not answered by the anthropic principle. Very important difference. Now, there are scientists who are atheists, and they say Well, because our universe is so special and so specific, we cannot be the only universe. There must be other universes. And this is a very peculiar argument because we have no natural, no scientific evidence that there are other universes actually. The only reason why there must be other universes from an atheist point of view is that the universe is fine-tuned to such a large degree. There are only three possibilities, either accident, a designer, or the multiverse. Accident is very unsatisfying to every scientist because to say one universe popped into being and that's all there is, and this universe happened to have this very improbable state, that's not really good science, we would say. So the other two options depend on your worldview. If you believe there is a God, then of course a designer is the better explanation. If you believe, no, I believe there is no God, then the only reasonable alternative is there must be many other universes, infinitely other universes, that somehow are produced by material processes. The interesting thing about that is now, if we look into quantum mechanics and think about how universes can be produced, then usually the universes that are produced should be much different, and most processes would probably produce very similar universes all the time, which means that the mechanism that produces a fine-tuned universe as ours again would have to be fine-tuned in order to arrive at our universe, which means that we actually do not get away from the fine-tuning, but we just shift it from first floor to ground floor. First floor would be our fine-tuned universe. And now we say this fine-tuned universe is just produced by a mechanism that is always producing different universes and goes through all possible states of universes. But then this mechanism that produces these universes must be fine-tuned itself. So we end up actually in worldview, in metaphysics, and not in physics anymore. John Polkinghorne wrote in his book One World, already when this idea came up earlier in the 80s, he says, let us recognize these speculations for what they are. They are not physics, they're not science, but in the strictest sense, they are metaphysics, something beyond physics, beyond the sciences. They are philosophy. There is no purely scientific reason to believe in an ensemble of universes. So there are no empirical evidences that actually force us to believe there is more than one universe, and we can't observe them. By construction, these other worlds are unknowable by us. How, by which mechanism should we be able to look outside of our own universe? That's hardly to imagine. We don't even know how to look to the ends of the universe, even not how to look outside of our universe. What data would there be from other universes into our universe? So it is not science. A possible explanation of equal intellectual respectability and, to my mind, greater economy and elegance would be that this one world is the way it is because it is the creation of the will of a creator who purposes that it should be so. Of course, the creator himself can also not be measured within our universe, but we have additional evidence that such a creator could exist if we look into the religions and into some experiences of our daily life. So he says this has greater economy, just postulating one God instead of infinite number of universes, and more elegance, because it's more beautiful to say this one universe has been crafted by a rational mind that loves symmetries as we observe the symmetries in our universe, in mathematics, in the mathematical description. And again, Arno Penzias has no problems with the fine-tuning. He says astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with a very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions to permit life, one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. If I believe there is a God, it is very plausible that the universe is not self-explaining, has a beginning, and has properties that point to someone who wanted life to be there. Additionally to that, you could make an additional argument. The place where we are on our planet Earth is uniquely favored in order to observe the universe. Not many other places in our galaxy would at the same time allow life and allow the exploration of the universe beyond our own galaxy because too many stars would be around us. and too much light, and so we could not look beyond our own galaxy. So for our understanding the cosmos and of the cosmos, we have probably the best place that we could ever get if we compare it to other possible places in the universe, and so on. So that's another argument. So this was argument number 2. Universe is not eternal, universe is fine-tuned. Both, in my mind, in my view, are more plausible with a personal God than with no God. The third argument goes a bit different. It is about why on earth do we have reason, rational capacities? Is reason just the product of blind chance, adaptive guesses, or is reason real, rational insight into rational laws that really do exist? The argument could be made in that way. First, if our rational mind is only the result of atomic and evolutionary material processes, it is not reliable to discover rational truth. It just makes adaptive guesses and optimizes itself. Second, our thinking seems to be reliable. That is why we do science, because we believe we can make true statements about the universe and nature. And we even recognize our errors and correct them over time. That is why you go to school and to university and have professors who will correct your errors. If that is true, then it follows that our mind is not of material origin. At the same time, you could make and proceed the argument further and say our mind obviously has a beginning, so it must have a non-material origin of rationality altogether. We need to end up with an eternal rational mind. And there, of course, we end up again with a personal God who has a reason, has a mind. So why do we believe that our mind is reliable? Evidence 1, nature seems to conform to mathematics. Albert Einstein wrote, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And a few words further, he writes that this is the case is a miracle. We have no rational reason why stupid matter has no mind, according to Albert Einstein, why it conforms to beautiful mathematical equations that we can understand with our mind. And mathematics itself is not dependent on matter to conform to it. 1 + 1 is equal to 2 would even be true if our universe would not exist. Mathematical truth is true, independent of the existence of matter. Very important thing. A friend of Einstein, Eugen Wigner, said, the miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift which we neither understand nor deserve. Very similar reasoning like Albert Einstein, and a very humble reasoning. I like that very much. And it expresses what atheists or agnostics, Eugen Wigner is an agnostic with Jewish background, but an agnostic, he says we cannot know about God. But he admits that if that is the case, if I don't believe in God, then I have no reason to believe why nature and matter, the universe, conforms to mathematical laws. All this would be of no use to us if our minds could not function and work reasonably. Our mind can reason logically. That is the premise that we need to believe if we do science. And all scientists would believe that. That's why postmodern people usually get in problems with scientists. Scientists usually are more modern, are modern people and not postmodern. So I take this quote by geneticist Haldane, which I think made the point very clear. And we need to concentrate to read that. It seems to me immensely unlikely that mind, rationality, is a mere byproduct of matter. For if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, the physical processes, if that is all about my mind, then I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. They may be sound chemically, they don't break any natural laws, but that does not make them sound logically. A calculator that calculates 1 + 1 is equal to 3 does not violate any natural law. And if it works out fine, then this calculator could multiply, and that could be the way how we would do maths. So, and hence I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. Because the belief that my brain is composed of atoms is a belief of that very brain that not necessarily has the capacity to think reliably. This is a problem for the materialist. And even Charles Darwin uh, quotes this or says this. It's called Charles Darwin's doubt. In a letter, he writes, "With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals," that's his persuasion, that our mind is just the product of blind forces coming through the animal kingdom, "are of any value or at all trustworthy." Which again would make me doubt my own presupposition whether I can actually claim what I claim, because my mind is just the product of an optimization process. The fundamental problem of materialism, which you can even look up in textbooks of philosophy, I can always say, if that is true, if materialism is true, my atoms make me believe A, and your atoms make you believe B. End of discussion. We cannot change it. If we want to change it, we need to see a neurosurgeon and change your atoms in your brain. But our experience shows us that often when we discuss a mathematical formula, for example, we can actually find out who is right. And this indicates that rational thinking obviously is not just the product of purely material processes. It is not just the product of neurons firing due to chemical potentials of the neurons in my brain, and it is not the result of an optimization process of optimal procretion. Little side note, the most intelligent people, like theoretical physicists or philosophers, have not been the most successful in procreation and producing offspring, interestingly. So what is the relation between the two? It seems that rationality is not connected to producing a lot of offspring necessarily. But if that is the case, then there are no reasons anymore why I do things, but only causes. If I'm a Christian, I can say we are created. And this is actually expressed in the original beacon of the Harvard University, which has 3 books. On the 3 books, it is written veritas. Veritas means truth in Latin. And it says the 3 books are actually God's word, the revelation of God's will, which he gave to us in the Bible. Second book, God's work, nature, which we have to look up and do experiments and do observations in order to find out, to think God's thoughts after him in his book. And the third book is God's mind, or our own reasoning, because we are made in the image of God. We are made in the image of God and hence have the capacity with our limited mind to think God's thoughts after him of his unlimited mind. We will never arrive at ultimate truth of God because only he has the unlimited eternal mind, but we can at least think his thoughts after him, which means we have a reason, a plausible reason why matter conforms to mathematics, because the rational God has created nature and put his logics into nature, into his creation. And at the same time, we are created in his image, as the Bible tells us. And so we share in his rationality and can discover his rationality back in nature. So we at least have a plausible story why we can do science and why our mind is able to discover real truth. Materialism does not have a good reason why this is the case. In materialism, the best guess is that reasoning is adaptive guessing, but it's not arriving at ultimate true thoughts, as Christians we can have. So this was the human mind. Now, a fourth reason, and of course there are many more reasons, but I just want to go to these 4 reasons as these are probably the most prominent. And that's the question about morals, which is also very important to the philosopher Thomas Nagel, who takes morals as one of the reasons why he doesn't believe that materialism can answer the story of the universe. The question is there a universal moral? Is there an objective good and bad? The argument, I take it from William Lane Craig again, is if God does not exist, there are no objective moral values, good and evil. But objective moral values exist. If both statements are true, then God exists by logical conclusion of these two premises. Of course, these premises can be discussed. You can discuss the first premise. If God does not exist, there are no moral objective values. Maybe there are objective moral values without God. Or second, you can say, I don't believe that there are objective moral values. Every culture has their own moral standards. So the question that I want to discuss now is moral universal and objective? There are interesting thought experiments, for example, one by Mark Hauser with 300,000 probants, test persons from different cultures and ages, including indigenes, people who still live in their original culture, not touched by Western civilization. And one of the test questions is: a train wagon runs towards a group of children, and you stand actually at a switch, and you have the chance to actually turn the switch so that the wagon will not run across the group of children, but it will hit on another track one man. It will hit one man and that man will die. And the question is, will you turn the switch? Will you do it? And nearly everyone, most of the people in that experiment said, yes, I will turn the switch in order to save the group of children and kill the man who will die, which is just a collateral damage in that case. The second scenario was you are not at a switch, but you stand on a bridge and you throw a man from the bridge down on the track. And that is a very powerful man, very strong man, very thick man. And so that man will definitely stop the wagon. It will not hit the group of the children. And again, the question, will you throw that man down from the bridge on the track so that the wagon will stop? The man will die, falling from the bridge and being hit by the wagon, but the children will be saved. In this case, interestingly, most people said, no, I will not throw down that person from the bridge. The interesting thing is that the result is the same. One man dies and a lot of children survive. Why do we behave differently in both cases? What is the difference? The difference is that in one case, the death of the man is a collateral damage. In the other case, the death of the man is the means by which I achieve my goal. That means the life of a human person becomes the means to achieve a goal. And so what we can conclude from that is human beings may never be used as a means towards another purpose. And that is something that seems to be intuitive to our psychological constitution, that a human being should not be used as a means to achieve other goals, but a human being has a dignity in themselves. Human beings seem to have an innate moral conscience. And the question is, where does this conscience come from? By the way, little side note, in Romans 2, you have a similar argument that even among those who don't have revelation from God, they have a conscience which tells them what is good and what is bad. Of course, this conscience can be screwed up and can have false intuitions and can also be misshaped, of course, but it is there. Human beings credit dignity to other human beings. And the question is, how can we objectively justify human dignity? If we come from a biblical Christian worldview or from a Jewish worldview, then we can say, like this author, who is actually a secular author, but wrote a book in defense of human beings, why we do need God in order to defend human beings and the dignity of human beings. That's what he means by that. And he writes in that book, the idea of being made in the image of God, as the Bible says in the first chapter, is connected to another kind of humanism. That Adam is God's image and similar to him is rooted in God's will and word. It is not an achievement, nor is it a value judgment, but it is a fact. Adam has not earned it. Likewise, he can't lose it undeservingly and irrevocably. You cannot earn it and you cannot lose it. It is just a fact given from outside because God says so. That is an objective foundation for human dignity. If you cross that out, then you will realize that secular alternatives are not much good. Because you need to argue human beings have dignity because of capabilities, like we can reason, we have a self-consciousness, we know that we are persons, and so on. But what about disabled people, people who suffer from dementia or from infants? They have the potential, or they lost the potential, but they don't have the capabilities. Even when you are asleep, do you still have the same dignity when you are asleep than when you are awake? It becomes very thin ice if you say human beings have a dignity because of certain capabilities. Second, you could argue, well, we have a certain dignity because we belong to the species Homo sapiens. Dot. Full stop. So, but why? Why should we have a special dignity only because we belong to a certain species? Peter Singer, a philosopher and ethicist, he would say, well, the great apes, they have interesting capabilities, for example, and it seems that we should definitely grant them the same dignity as human beings, sometimes even greater dignity than human beings when it comes, for example, to sick people and so on, or to very evil people and so on. So it seems that human dignity cannot be grounded in biology itself. It's very arbitrary. And third, what we end up with is finally social convention. We discuss why do certain people have dignity and why not, and then we end up with our zeitgeist. You know, when we travel back in time, 80 years in Germany, we had a certain regime which said, well, not all people are equal. Some people have dignity if they are Aryans, and if they are not, they don't have dignity. And so we ended up with the Holocaust and with the ultimate catastrophe of human civilization so far. Social convention is a very, very fragile basis for funding, for grounding human dignity on it. It is very interesting that even secular sociologist, Jürgen Habermas, in his book Time of Transitions, where he's looking for an ethical foundation for a post-national Europe and a post-national society. And he says this, which is amazing. Universalistic egalitarianism, which means all human beings are equal in dignity and in their rights, in their basic rights. This is the basic principle, he says, from which sprang the ideals of freedom and a collective life in solidarity, the autonomous conduct of life and emancipation, the individual morality of conscience, human rights, and democracy. Everything that the West is actually proud of and glad about is the direct legacy of the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love, Old Testament and New Testament. This legacy, substantially unchanged, has been the object of continual critical appropriation and reinterpretation. So it is the basis which had to be applied to social contexts and circumstances. But to this day, there is no alternative to this legacy, to this foundation. And in light of the current challenges of a post-national constellation, we continue to draw on the substance of this heritage. Everything else is just idle postmodern talk. Wow. That's a very strong statement by an agnostic, or rather atheistic, philosopher who admits our ethical system does only work because we are grounded in the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, and the New Testament, the commandment of love. Love God and love your neighbor. That's the foundation for a post-national ethics. For a very experienced sociologist. Very interesting. So we have seen 4 plausibility arguments. That objective morals, for example, can only exist if there is a personal God. or most plausibly only exists then. We have seen arguments from science and so on. Of course, there are many more arguments, but I want to stop here. And now we would transition to the arguments. If there is a personal God, why on earth is it Jesus Christ? Why is it the Christian God?